We're just waiting for the 1 o'clock on the dot timestamp. Thank you, everybody that's joining in. We're excited to be here. We hope we don't bore you with insurance talk. Give it another 30 seconds and then we'll get started. All righty. Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are Willis Towers Watson, a fine art specialty insurance broker, and we've organized this webinar to help give a very basic insurance 101 for the fine art museum industry. I'm Kristina Marcigliano, and I'm here with my colleague, Emma Alexander, and she's going to start us off.
Are you able to navigate?
Yeah, right here.
Quick technical question. There we go. Okay, we're working. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here. As Kristina said, we are very glad to be with you today, having a chance to kind of chat about insurance and hopefully, have some good dialogue, answer some questions, and just touch base with you guys. A little bit of background on our organization and on us. WTW Fine Arts has been a proud sponsor of our CWR for many years, and we are very glad to continue our partnership with your organization. Kristina and I were actually in Reno last year, and we attended the Registrars luncheon. We are very much looking forward to hopefully seeing some of you again this year in Salt Lake.
We didn't set a booth. We sat in on the panels because we kind of wanted to be in the mix with everybody. And we found some of them extremely informative. One of the big takeaways that Emma and I had were the vibes that were put out of museums kind of working together and sharing resources. And it really felt like a very collaborative compared to a competitive setting last year. So we really enjoyed that. And we look forward to seeing everybody this year.
So I'll start with a little introduction. I've been working with Willis Fine Art for going on 10 years now. I work with a lot of museums, university, state programs. I help to set up and kind of assist with the day-to-day insurance needs of a lot of our cultural institutions.
And my name is Kristina. I have been with Willis just over a year, but prior to joining, I was with another firm, again, fine art specialty broker, and I've been working in fine art specialty insurance for almost 20 years now, not to age myself. But I have a strong emphasis on the commercial aspect of fine art insurance, so I don't handle many collectors. I focus on museum institutions, foundations, artist studios, and gallery clients. So I put a lot of emphasis in contract review, transfer of risks, and claims servicing and handling. So the more complex, the better for me. So we figured we'd start out by talking about who are the players in the art museum industry. So first, you kind of had this web. This one was mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
This web of, who does what. And I feel like a lot of times clients don't even know the difference between an insurance company, who's an adjuster, what does a broker do. So this is a little bit of a map of the playing field. And side note, after the presentation, we'll make sure that we email our PowerPoint slides so that they can go out to anybody that attended. So from me being a broker, it's important that I express to my clients that the different roles that are played in the insurance transaction. So you'll have an insured, which would be a museum institution, an artist studio, a gallery, a foundation, and you're working direct with one of us, a broker, or whoever you work with in the industry. Willis is not the only fine art specialty broker. While we think we're the best, there are others in the industry, and we can't handle every museum client, right? So we're friends with our competitors, very good relationships in the industry. And not every broker is going to fit you as an institution's personality and your needs and kind of how you work and service. So knowing your broker is a part of this, but knowing your insurance company, right? Are you with a specialty fine art insurance company that is experienced with underwriting a fine art risk? And does your broker understand the difference between those companies? So then the broker is with the carrier, and then carriers hire adjusters. Some of you may see third-party adjusters assigned by your insurance company. They do things like claims reviews or security surveys. So sometimes if you're in a catastrophic prone zone, which many of you are, being the Western Museum Conference, we're talking about California earthquake, wildfire, your insurance company may assign a third-party adjuster to do a review or a security inspection to see if there's any additions or changes that should be made, such as protections from brush. Have you had earthquake retrofitting? Have you had construction done recently where you may have better protections than your old museum that was underwritten 20 years ago? So a lot of these aspects are important to know who are the different players in the game and why they are playing a role in the insurance transaction. I tried to put in a little funny slide here of the map, but basically this is kind of a who's who, and I put some arrows to show who's going to work together. So you'll see, again, if you're the insured, the attendees on the webinar, you may be working with third-party lenders or borrowers if you have outgoing items, and those would be galleries, museums, collectors, foundations. So you have mutual interest and you're transacting between each other, but then you, the insured museum, are going to your specialty fine art broker, who then will go to the insurance companies. And we listed a couple of the well-known companies here because if you're reviewing insurance and considering accepting a borrower's policy, sometimes you can gauge whether it's going to be sufficient coverage or not just by seeing a carrier name. So as a specialty broker, Emma and I work with these carriers on a day-to-day basis, usually emailing and harassing them all day long. And so I will know, who can do what. I will know if you're going to get a quick response time from X carrier, or I know if Y carrier really doesn't like the California earthquake zone, so they're going to decline a risk. And so knowing who's capable of doing what and who has certain appetites is extremely important for your broker to know and advocate on your behalf so that they can get you the most important catastrophic prone coverages for most of the individuals that are on this call. I hope you all recognize the Abbott and Costello poster here too. Again, not trying to age myself, but if you're on the call and you don't know who that is, please go Google it and watch it. So another tidbit is, what are the different types of policies your broker can get you? And this is extremely important for museums because you are a lot of time either sending out your items and someone's going to insure it, so you want it reviewed to make sure they're going to adequately insure it, but also you want the right coverage because you're taking someone's stuff in, right? And you're going to be beholden to making them whole again in the event of physical loss or damage. So you're going to want to make sure you can meet those contractual liabilities within your loan and consignment agreements. But also when you send out, you want to make sure that the borrowing party is also able to meet those contractual agreements. So you can go one of two ways. We recommend standalone monoline fine art policies. This may be if you work with HTB or Hub, Willis, you might see a standalone Berkeley or StarNet or AXA XL policy where it's just insuring limits to your fine art property. Another way the insurance is sometimes done, which we don't really recommend, but some smaller institutions can make it work, is a commercial property policy like a Hartford or a CNA or Travelers. They will sometimes offer a cultural institutions enhancement where they'll give you an additional endorsement on the policy to cover fine art property, but it's kind of tacked on to a commercial general liability and business property policy. So it's more of an add-on, whereas you as an institution will want to see a specialty standalone policy just for the art. You want sole focus on the art for the valuation, terms and conditions, exclusions, the clauses that are going to come in play when a claim arises. So we don't usually recommend accepting that type of policy where it's tacked on to a commercial general liability. And we don't recommend that you do that either. You may have gaps in coverage. You may not be able to meet your contractual obligations. So this is something that you should consider speaking about with your broker. Ask them, do we have a standalone monoline fine art policy, or are we just covering our fine art inventory, our permanent collection, property of others on our commercial general liability policy as an add-on? It's an extremely important question to ask because, again, this could prohibit you from being able to meet contractual requirements.
Big question for everybody. Who here, raise your hand or give a reaction, who here actually knows who the broker is? All right, I see a couple people.
Oh, I see some thumbs up. Yay, good, okay.
Great, that's what we like to hear. Second question, how many of you have actually spoken to your broker? Good. Couple. Excellent. So your broker's number one job is to be a resource for you. Their job is to be someone who you can call or write an email to, ask a question, and have a conversation. Sometimes insurance can almost be like another language. It can be very legal, it can be very, specific, well, what happens if? So having that touch point where you can go and have a conversation and really dialogue and have someone sort of navigate and smooth out the complexities can really help in making sure that you have the right coverage for your needs. As Kristina mentioned, a monoline fine art policy is, a little bit different than an expanded property or cultural institutions endorsement. So having someone who knows the difference and who can tell you, I think this product will best meet your needs and your obligations is oftentimes very helpful. So your broker primarily should be helping to organize your insurance coverage, make recommendations, and connect you with specialty carriers who can offer the appropriate coverage for your needs. It also kind of connects you to additional people in underwriting and claims who understand the unique needs of cultural institutions. Ensuring a local history archive is very different than ensuring the computers in your office. And having someone who can help to make those connections and facilitate those connections is really the role of the broker. So more than that, even, their job is to help advocate for you, answer questions, and even provide additional services like contract reviews, loan agreement reviews, having a conversation about the hypotheticals and making sure that you are covered for both your collections and for your obligations to others.
And claims. Claims is another part of that advocacy. If you have a claim, one of my biggest pet peeves as a broker is when I hear from a client that they said, oh, my broker told me I really shouldn't put in claims. I think that's one of the largest bits of disservice that can be given to, especially a museum institution who may be a nonprofit, who again is now indebted to someone else whose property you had. That should not be the automatic response. Don't put in claims. It hurts your loss history. Your broker should talk through any scenario that could give rise to a claim, and you should feel comfortable to have that conversation. Well, what if? You don't have to immediately submit a claim just because there's a damage. Your broker should talk through, well, here are the repercussions, right? Maybe for your loss history or your rates, if you do put in a claim. Or no, this is below your deductible. Don't put in a claim because they're not going to pay it. All those little factors of how your policy should and shouldn't respond, you should be able to have a very off the record, frank conversation with your broker. They're your ally, they're your advocate. That's what they're there for.
Okay, I'll bring you right back in.
I think we had a chat. Was it a question on the chat, or I just don't want to skip anybody if there's
just a statement. Brokers are a great resource.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Yes, that's true. I sat on, it wasn't a museum, but a large gallery client. We did a call for an hour and a half this morning with their Paris team so that we could align with the hours, just going over contracts and loan agreements and what happens if you have something ingoing, outgoing, who's insuring. So yes, your broker should be doing that with you on a regular basis. And again, there shouldn't be an extra charge for that either. This is just the service you get with working with a specialty broker. Handing it over to Emma. On that point, loan agreements.
On that point, loan agreements. Yes, please do feel free to have your brokers review your loan agreements, review your contracts. I myself spent, about 45 minutes on a conversation with another institution's broker advocating for my client to ensure that we smoothed out some requirements. I'm so sorry. Lost my train of thought.
No, but yeah, it's just something that is going to come up regularly, especially if you have templates maybe. So some museums will have templates where this is what we always agree to, or someone will mark up the changes. And again, depending on the institution, you may not have in-house legal counsel. So you then may have to go to an outside third party who's going to charge you hundreds of dollars per hour to look at changes to the insurance section of your contract. Before you do that and incur those fees, make sure you're checking in with your broker, because it's something that they could probably be making sure aligns with your insurance contract. And we are in no way, shape, or form lawyers or providing legal advice, but I likely know better how your policy is going to need to align with your contract wording better than maybe a lawyer might, because we do these policies all day long, in and out. I've handled probably 200 claims in my own individual career, and they've totaled up to over $100 million in damages across those claims. So I've seen anywhere from fire damage, water damage, pipes burst. I've seen a bird poop on a painting and having to get it conserved. So, you want to make sure that the loan agreement and your contracts are always going to align with the insurance, and that you're not taking on extra exposure. Sometimes people will try to squeeze in any loss is a total loss, right? Or absolute liability. You're agreeing to cover this no matter what happens. Well, these are all risk policies with set exclusions. So you can't be saying, I'm going to cover wear and tear and gradual deterioration if your policy doesn't cover it. You don't want to pick up all that extra exclusions. And then wildfire and earthquake concerns, being that this is the Western Museum Conference Registrars, and that's the main audience for this webinar, it is a big, big concern to discuss wildfire and earthquake issues. Do you have the proper coverage for that within your policy? Because if you don't, that may prohibit you from getting certain loans incoming. Lenders are going to want to see, can you evidence that type of coverage to me? Have you spoken to your broker? Is there a deductible for that type of loss that I need to disclose to a lender in the event of physical loss or damage from those covered claims? So these are all conversations and just tipping points that we wanted to leave with you, that you should feel comfortable, speaking to your broker. And not that we're here to say, again, we're not the only broker that does this. We have many colleagues in the industry, people that we're friends with. So you may be with a perfect fine art broker that can talk about these. But if for some reason you felt like you can't, Emma and I are a resource here for you to talk about or raise any questions to if you feel like you need to. Forward. Claim stories. I'll jump on these.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So I figured we'd talk about obviously what can physically happen to the art. That's what we're here for, right? That we're here to protect the cultural heritage of the artworks, whether in our permanent collections or on property of others that are on loan to us for exhibit. So this starts at the time pieces are installed off the wall, being put into a crate, right? So we're talking about wall to wall coverage. As soon as it starts moving, that's when a borrowing institution is going to be liable to cover. So as soon as it starts going put in that crate, that's part of the transit. Packing is part of the transit because it would have never been moved into a crate if it wasn't part of this transaction. So we see a lot of shipping losses. We see a lot of the handlers, unfortunately, at the packers and shippers, especially during COVID when people were desperate looking for work, or maybe the right checks and balances weren't being done in training due to restrictions from COVID. So maybe people that were handling the art weren't as qualified as some of the prior employees. And so we did see a lot of transit damage during COVID. We also had the restrictions of travel. So whereas maybe a high value incoming piece was going to be handled by an agent traveling with it, making sure all the packing, condition checking was done as it moved along, maybe the travel restrictions prohibited that. So I had myself a very large claim that I handled for a client where they couldn't have their oversight watching the packing and shipping of this high value piece. And that's when a damage occurred. And we only knew about it when the crate arrived in the US and it was opened and unpacked. And we found little bits of debris. And a corner chunk of the piece was missing, and that wasn't in the crate. It ended up being on the floor, actually, at the packer shippers, which was found by the janitor sweeping it up. So the types of claims, again, think of anything. You take a tangible asset. What can physically happen to this? Water, fire, smoke damage, theft, an elbow through a painting. You name it there. The claim stories are just never ending. And what's tough is the total losses, as heartbreaking as they are, those are the easy ones to handle, right? If we know something's a total loss, it should be quick. It's got to be destroyed, get rid of the remnants, and get a check. But the broker's role really plays out in a conservation type claim. So when we've got a physical loss or damage, and it can be repaired, right? But how long can the repair take? I myself have handled a Richard Serra claim where a piece had to be refabricated, but we needed to get the lead from Italy. So shipping that into the US, getting the proper lead, the amount we needed, took about 6 months. Then it had to go sit at Richard Serra's fabricator, which based on their schedule, if they were doing an exhibition for him or upcoming works in progress, we had to kind of wait when they had availability. So the fabricator alone took another 8 months. So now by the time the claim is moving along, we're 2 years in, and the client who had the damage is still not made whole again. Sadly, that piece had even further delays, and the carrier had to just cut the check for the total loss, even after they sat waiting for 3 years. And the carrier took possession of the piece because they were going to prolong the conservation plan, but they had to make the institution whole again. Your insurance has to make you whole on the date of loss. That's what the effective date of a claim would be. And so you're looking at values and conservation and the treatment all based on from that date of loss. So 3 years in to try to make someone whole again is way too long of a waiting process. So unfortunately, that piece was a total loss paid to the institution. And I believe the insurance company still maintains possession of the piece completed and has yet to sell it. So the point of that story is that you have a broker that holds your hand along the way, because if that were a property of others in one of your museum institutions, it could be causing friction and tension with your lenders. Or if a borrower hears that the situation like that happened and it's a prolonged claim process, you don't want it to do reputational damage or prohibit you from getting future loans or exhibitions coming to you. So it sounds very far-fetched and down a web of individuals, but your broker can play a role in your reputation with claims if you've got property of others in your care, custody, and control, and making sure you're able to make a good on your contractual obligations and promises to make someone whole again if you had their items. So while that was a long wind of chatting, are there any questions or anything that you might have as webinar participants regarding claims? In case anyone's typing, I don't want to rush, but No? Okay. So that was the majority of the information we wanted to tip off and go share with you guys. We're open to any questions, comments, any feedback you might have. If you've worked with Willis before, if you have never heard of us, if you have anything you'd like to ask to your brokers or anything we could answer for you pertaining to your insurance, now is the time.
So we have Jacqueline, who's asking how important are condition reports to claims process?
So condition reports are very important, especially on high value pieces, to have the before and afters. However, you don't always have the time to get extremely detailed condition reports, right? So when there's a situation like that, I would say always get an image or a video, right? So I've had clients who were like, oh, we don't have the time to do a full 10-page condition report and document every little nook and corner. What was important then was that we had images, or, phones are so handy. You can walk around and take a video of a phone before something packs, or even as it's sitting inside the crate, because you're going to then use that to substantiate, well, this mark wasn't there before, and now that the transit's ended, it's arrived at our space, you can clearly see a difference. So being trained on condition reports is really important. I know ARCS had done some presentations, or had some, like, you could pay to join and do condition report training for some of your staff. That's nothing I've ever been experienced in doing. I've never worked in a museum myself, so I don't know the intricacy of condition reports. But when worst case scenario fails, always have images or videos of a piece if you can't get someone to do a detailed list of condition reports, because that's going to be able to be the best proof of before and after when all else fails. But I would say they are very important.
And then Melanie is asking, do you have suggestions for people who are in a large institution like a university that have no contact with brokers and such?
Actually, Melanie, I'm curious as to that question, because is there someone else at the institution that does and you're roadblocked from them? If that's the scenario, I would say utilize sponsors like ourselves. And again, not to tip off my competitors, but HTB, I know, is a sponsor with Western Museum Conference too. I would say try, it sounds silly, but making friends with people. I have given advice to people who are not my clients just because of maintaining relationships. And listen, maybe a registrar is going to pop out of another institution and have the say in the insurance, and maybe if they can work with us. I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Emma, but I'm sure the two of us would be here if any of you ever had questions and you don't have direct contact with your broker. We couldn't give you specific advice as to how your specific policy would respond. We can give you general advice as to an insurance scenario, or what we know the market could or couldn't do. So I would say feel free to utilize that and ask us, but that is something that could present a problem if you need specifics on your policy and you're roadblocked from your broker. So the question, I feel like that leaves it a little open-ended, but the question, it depends on the question. If it's specific to your individual coverage, like your deductible, or do we have exclusions, we wouldn't be able to answer that. But for a scenario, a generic scenario, we could definitely be a resource to help you.
And Robert's chiming in on that, saying, ask permission from university risk manager to be able to contact the broker directly. So that was a response to Melanie's question. And so Catherine is asking, when lenders, especially private collectors, ask a museum to assume absolute liability, what have you found to be the most effective negotiating tactics for a museum to talk them out of it and accepting insurance coverage limits?
So then we tell our clients to make a Willis and Kristina the bad cop, and I will go yell at them and say, no, we're not accepting absolute liability. It ends up being a business decision. This happens on the gallery side too, and foundations. Absolute liability is you saying that no matter what happens, it doesn't matter if it's excluded, you're going to be on the hook for it. One way around it that I've seen some museum institutions to try to limit their liability for it is anything out, they'll add a clause that says anything outside of what insurance covers, we agree to pay to X amount, right? So if it's maybe it ends up being gradual wear and tear because you're displaying sculptures outside. And so instead of a sudden occurrence, maybe there could be sun damage over time to a glazing, right? So some of the institutions I've seen will offer regular cleaning as maintenance to avoid being on the hook for total value of absolute liability. So to avoid the absolute liability, you almost put in a limit of liability where you're saying, all right, we agree to cover XYZ. We do have these exclusions, but we will pick up, maybe these exclusions, but cap ourselves at whatever the institution feels comfortable paying out of pocket in order to get that exhibition. So one client I know, it was worried about the maintenance of outdoor sculptures again. So they threw in a clause, we agree contractually to do regular cleaning. So then again, this is outside of insurance. It becomes contractual agreement. If they didn't do it, they would be in breach of contract. And so we agreed to do regular cleaning. We'll cover, $5,000 every month to do cleaning. And if the cleaning fails, we agreed to cover no more than $10,000 for physical loss or damage by this cause of loss. So it's something that's excluded on your policy, but you're making your self-insurance a limit at that cap. So sometimes you can get that done. But absolute liability is a problem, especially from some high-end collectors, I will say, what their lawyers try to squeeze that into contracts. But aside from absolute liability, the other one is any loss is a total loss, which is extremely frustrating and not something in the market that anybody wants to set a precedent for. It's any loss is a total loss would mean, any little ding to the corner of an item where there could be a 1% loss in value. The lender then gets the right to deem it a total loss, which is not what insurance is there for. It's to make someone whole, not to let them abscond and abandon a piece of artwork. So yeah, that's it. The absolute liability and any loss is a total loss is a regular problem, and your broker should insert themselves trying to push back on it for you and be the bad cop.
Okay, and Alexander is asking, can you define waivers of subrogation and why a lender's insurer might request one in favor of the lender?
Yes. So lenders, if you're an institution taking in an artwork, so I'm going to say Kristina Institution is borrowing an artwork from Emma Institution. There could be an instance where I'm arranging the shipping to come to me, and Emma will say, well, in your agreement, you're agreeing care, custody, and control. Kristina's taking care, custody, and control. I'm going to insure. But she wants a waiver of subrogation as she's packing maybe the artwork, right? So she's involved in the transaction because she's helping oversee some of the packing. And so her institution may want a waiver of subrogation so that when I say I'm covering the transit, if I think she caused the damage actually while she was packing, my insurance could technically subrogate and go after her and sue. So they could pay me the claim, which is silly because if she's a lost payee and it was her item, I'm going to pay it. But then they could technically sue and go after her to recoup that, what we just paid her because she was at fault. So a waiver of subrogation is requested when someone doesn't want you and their insurance company to be able to subrogate or come after you to recoup on the loss that they paid. If I'm taking care, custody, of control, it's unusual for me to offer someone else a waiver of subrogation if I'm agreeing to insure and I'm taking care, custody, of control. So sometimes, unfortunately, because it's just the way it is in the art world, you'll get a request of, I want additional insured, I want a lost payee, I want primary non-contributory, I want waivers of subrogation, right? These kind of insurance terminology contract clauses. People will just ask for everything under the sun. And again, it's important to raise that to your broker. Is this even applicable? So say someone asks for additional lost payee, additional insured, lost payee, and waiver of subrogation. Some of those clauses offset the others, and they don't know that. They're just asking for every potential applicable clause. So in some of the instances, it's important to be able to push back when someone wants a waiver. The one times you're probably never going to be able to push back is when it's a packer shipper asking for the waiver. That's almost, you're always going to have to give it to them. So, but yeah, if it's a lender, and again, Alexander, depending on the situation, if one ever arises or you have one specific that you'd like to speak offline about that maybe wouldn't have been applicable, I can kind of tell you how we would have responded, depending on who was taking care, custody, and control, or who was appointing the agent, arranging the shipment. We can kind of give you a little insight into how our brains would have worked on that. if it helps.
Thank you so much.
I think we hit all our questions.
Yeah. Anyone have anything else?
So if not, we will be in Salt Lake City in September. We're excited to hear about the volunteer day. So whenever anyone is aware of what that final decision is, or date or location, Emma and I would love to join in and help with the volunteer day. We missed it last year, and I wish I had gone because it was in Lake Tahoe, and we were really jealous of everybody else that got to go. But we will be in Salt Lake City, so we'll be happy to chat with you in person or meet and go over anything you might have. And please sign up to come to the luncheon. We are one of the sponsors of the lunch on Saturday, I think it is, during the Western Museum Conference. So we will be there, and we have we're contributing a raffle to this year's luncheon. I spoke to Melanie about it. So Willis will be coming with a raffle giveaway, trying to beat out who had the Polar Express mug last year. So yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you all. And our contact info will be in the PowerPoint slides. We'll send it out so that everybody that was participating gets it. And we hope to hear from you and see some of you in Salt Lake. And thanks for listening to our boring, dorky insurance talk.
Not at all. You got lots of thank yous.
All right. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.